Good morning, good afternoon, LinkedIn. Happy Tuesday. Here with another edition of Let's Build Workspaces in HubSpot with Danielle Urban. How you doing, Danielle?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Um, wasn't super sure about the topic today as you presented it. But when I asked for help from Claude to build the post, I was like, oh yeah. So we're talking about why the SaaS CMO and product leader need to be best friends. Um, uh, yeah, have a alignment is generally a good thing, and if you don't have it, it causes all sorts of problems. But I don't have a bunch of SaaS experience, so I am eager to listen to you drop the knowledge, and I'm sure we can have some fun talking about this uh,
Yeah.
spicy topic. I'm sure.
It shouldn't be spicy. It's all love. But as we know, my whole career has basically been SaaS. Um, so it's all I could talk about. So this is why we work well together. We come from very different worlds. Um,
Yes. So
but
why is this
it's
on your mind today?
it's on my mind because I've got a couple conversations and projects happening already this week that just keep kind of pointing back to this. One of them is a rollout of implementing custom events, which I've sort of talked about more generally on this show before when I dove into custom events with Brian Osa a couple months ago. I think that was that project is finally wrapping up, and we're able to kind of see the results of getting those custom events into HubSpot and how it's going to enable their marketing team. They're hiring a new marketer who's going to take over a lot of the execution, sort of like take the baton and keep running with it as our next step, and how they can better customize their audiences. They're kind of a unique case because their website is their product. It's like a true SaaS, like it is software as a service because their service is their website. And they have kind of a library of content that people can interact with. And that's what we're sending custom events about. And so for them, because their product is their website, we needed to make sure that everything was really mapped very closely to what they wanted their audiences to take action on. And so this wasn't even a product driven effort. This was really marketing that said, we need more data and pushed this project forward and invested a lot, like a lot of time and money into this, especially for the size that they are. Not quite sure. I think we've crossed six figures maybe between the tech stack and the work to implement it. Um, and for a small company, that's a massive amount of money. Like I come from startup backgrounds, and I was lucky if I got a budget of like $5,000 a month. So in my world, that is like eye popping money. I know in enterprise that's like a rounding error, but in my world, that's a lot of money to invest in a single effort. But it's going to fundamentally change the way that they can engage with their market and their audience. And so that was one thought I had. And then another is another client I'm working with is kind of grappling with how they want to pull their product data into HubSpot and how they want to make that product data actionable. Right now, they have a very rudimentary API push that's just sending like three properties into HubSpot. And it's not enough. It's not enough. It's very rigid. It requires on dev resources to update it. And it's not actionable enough. And because of this stage of their company, again, SaaS startups, they want to be a little bit more nimble than having to go back to the devs that built this push for them. Um, so it's been really interesting to kind of see everybody like throw it all up in the air and see where it lands, and then start to think about how do we pull these pieces together to make it all make sense. And as we know at Inbound, they talked about amplitude on the main stage. Whenever something gets mentioned on the main stage, it's a big deal. And so their deeper partnership with Amplitude to bring product interactions into HubSpot, or at least make them visible. I haven't personally explored that integration very well yet. Um, but just at least getting the information in the same place, it really changes how your marketing team can understand what's happening in the real world in post sales and sort of loop back on that to be more to help grow the business or be more actionable. And then you've got your customer success side that needs access to this information. And a conversation I had yesterday with that SaaS startup, I was saying, how do we get it all in there? And they were thinking like, well, maybe we don't get it all in there. Maybe we keep it somewhere else. And I was like, that's the wrong answer. Like, that's not it. But all right, we'll figure this out. Maybe you want to use Amplitude because I hear it works with HubSpot.
Oh man.
So there's a lot swirling in my mind this week related to this topic and sort of seeing it play out from the very early stages to the very end stages of how they really use the information.
So are as it comes to like product and marketing, are both teams in these cases equally throwing stuff up in the air? Or like I'm curious who's the one saying maybe we don't bring it all in?
Well, so the one who's saying maybe we don't bring it all in, maybe we actually separate it out, is the one that is kind of locked into this dev update process. Like if they want to change anything, changing how they sell the product, how they market the product, how they, execute against the contract even, is kind of locked into those three properties pushing over. I would argue those three properties pushing over are not that valuable to begin with because of how it's set up. So if they're not building their team around that and they're not building their processes around those three properties that we're pushing in, like they're kind of useless anyway. And that's
S-
the point that they're at.
So are they a product person or a marketing person, or have they not even gone down that differentiation route yet?
The person I'm working with, my point of contact on this project and this client is a CRO. So they're really focused on they're focused on like how do we take this to market. So
Yeah.
it's taking it from a product, and they're so small that they don't even really have product marketing. So they don't have someone who's forming the content and the positioning for the product. That's kind of rolling up to this person who's also managing the pipeline and how it gets sold, which again, for their early stage and their very small team, it makes a lot of sense to have someone own that and test and iterate quickly and stay very close to the data that's coming in. But that's where I'm like, if your data is not with your marketing data, like your product interaction data is not with your marketing data, how do you know anything's working? Like, is it working? And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that conversation keeps moving. That was yesterday morning. So we've got a lot more to work through and kind of scope out what that project looks like and what makes sense to build, because I completely understand where they're coming from and that they need to stay nimble. And I think there are enough tools at our disposal to be nimble and use it in HubSpot rather than just kind of wiping it all clean and starting over. Although I would argue this custom integration that they have going is definitely not the answer.
Right. And this is often like it's the trouble with building something before you've mapped everything.
Hmm.
Like, and also one of the differences that when you approach it a certain way with HubSpot, because everybody's got baggage related to, oh, we built it this way. Now it's impossibly difficult to make any kind
Yeah.
of changes. And it costs so much money because we didn't tell them we just want to add one property. And it's like, oh, we got to change the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have to do that, first of all.
Right.
But when you don't map your stuff beforehand, how could that developer possibly know like where you could go? Like it makes sense as to why they build stuff the way they do because they need it to be robust and working. And if you
Hmm.
don't tell them all the variables that might impact, like they're not going to account for it. It just creates extra code and that kind of stuff. So I'm curious, like, is that challenge? Is that why maybe we don't bring it all into HubSpot? Is that where that's coming from?
Yes. So I think the person I'm working with is fairly familiar with HubSpot, which is helpful, but certainly not to the degree where they're pulling apart and understanding APIs and mappings and data infrastructure and all of these pieces that we live and breathe. And so even going through a screen share with reporting, it's like you've told me 100 times that you've worked in HubSpot, you know how it goes, and also you don't know how to build this report. Like you don't know what that button is. And so it's always like that's great. I want to get to that point where I understand what you understand so that me as a coach and your partner in building and making decisions can understand like where do I need to meet you on this journey.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a separate issue. That's just like the interpersonal part of consulting. But then the front end of that is like, all right, well, you understand tech to work this way. You see what's here, and I agree with you that the structure is too rigid and expensive to update and change. And again, early stage startups, their processes are changing, their people are changing, their team structure is changing. And so they want to have that flexibility. But I'm also of the mindset that like you should have all your data in one place, and in the place that it's most actionable. So even if you build a data warehouse and use a BI tool, or somehow get a BI tool that's going to pull it all together where you don't have a data warehouse, which I would never do, but there are ways to kind of do that. Um, that's kind of what they're thinking is like, well, then we just add data sources, we move things around, see what's happening, and go from there. My argument against that, and what I'm going to coach them to do, is staying focused on a nimble go to market. So, your strategy to actually take this product out to the marketplace and talk about it and enable your marketing team of one or two uh, to push something out there that's accurate and discover things that might be interesting to their market. They're not going to see that unless you've got, a very open conversation with your dev team and your measurement team for product usage, and maybe even customer success is part of that conversation. But if we can just set it up so people can be self-service and grow your business faster and make decisions and discover things faster and more accurately without taking like an hour out of every week to get 12 people in the room, like everybody is better off. And that goal of staying nimble and testing things and how you go to market is even more achievable. And you're able to test things faster because everything comes together in one place and everyone's looking at the same set of data in the place that is actionable. And that's the key that I have to keep saying is like in the place that it's actionable. Because, like I said, if you have it in a BI tool, sure, you can look at it, you can poke around. But if you want to take that subset of people and upsell them, or take that subset of people and run a seasonal campaign against it, you can't do that if it's in another platform. Like it's just that much harder. You need more people to pull that out. And then, like, how do you get your user information matched up to your marketing database? And are they opted in? And like, can you even talk to them and try to upsell them? And so you're building all of these extra steps into that marketing strategy and that marketing process just to get it done when you don't have to. Like, you can just shortcut that part.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, oh man, especially if everything is about the website, like the power of just matching the CRM to the website,
Yes,
like should
thankfully
make,
that client is very well aligned. There's no way that
right.
couldn't be. But
Right. And that's where like, yeah, all the data, man, I think what you highlight there is there's two sides of actionability. One, understanding whether or not it is actionable, and then being able to act on it very easily. Right.
right.
Which to your point, like, and this is always the challenge in the manufacturing space where it's okay, cool. That sounds like a good idea, but I can't access data from the ERP to even send an email. So like I can't do what you're asking me to do. Or if you want me to, I have to ask service to give me the email address and then I manually input it. Right. That doesn't
Right.
work. Okay.
Not at scale.
Yeah. And maybe the first time just to prove that you need the data and like this is how it would work and look in HubSpot. But very quickly after that, this is why we need it in HubSpot because we want to do this hundreds of times, thousands of times.
Right.
And just because our team can step up, and I think this is where like maybe it relates to your conversation about like being aligned
Mm.
and using the system to help with that, right? Most often, I think a lot gets lost in the intercommunication between
Mhm.
departments
Yep.
just to stay aligned to do their jobs, right? And the amount of time that takes, right? So many stories about, oh, I need to call up the shipping department to see if something has shipped today. And I have
Mhm.
to do that with almost every customer because they always ask me for the tracking number before I have it and all this stuff. Like whether it's manufactured products or SaaS, the same kinds of conversations are being had just because the data is not all like together, right?
Right. And you're
So how do
wasting
you,
time and resources.
when it's like 3 points of data versus all of it, um, where's the line, I guess, for all of it? Are you trying to help them say like okay, let's figure out all the actionable points of data? Or are you seeing it as easier just to like, let's just connect and bring it all over?
I don't know. I think you need to be my consultant so I can better consult them. We need to figure out what's the next question. And trying to understand, like, okay, what's the data that we need to pull through? And there's some exploring to be done there in that, like, what is the existing tech stack on the product side? I don't actually know in this case. And I've been working with this client since the spring. So we're 6, 7 months into this, and I don't know what your product team uses to track usage. I know that there's kind of an internal, the way that they sell things is a little funky, but they have an internal system that at least shows them what's happening and how things are getting used. But I don't know if that's structured enough to be nimble and push things into HubSpot. Or do we have to, like, is the only way this custom coded API that's pushing things over? And if that's true, like, that's definitely not the only way. Like, let's figure some other things out here. Like, let's add some tech. We could even do free tech with, Google Tag Manager and HubSpot events. They already have HubSpot Enterprise. So, like, we have these tools at our disposal. Let's put them to work in the way that makes the most sense. And then it's kind of live testing what's too much, what's just enough. How do we push it into the theme of our show, Workspaces, so that it is actionable and it's not just a deluge of like unreadable data in front of our marketing team, because they might not even know what that coded button is. And so finding that line of like, okay, what is our goal for marketing? And I think the answer in this case is to have a nimble team that can take action quickly to develop content and generate leads. And so informing that with, top features or seasonality around customers, or, anything that we could pull out. We have to figure out what questions we want to answer in order to get to that point. And I'm making a lot of assumptions about their marketing team and their marketing strategy. But, I come from demand gen. This is what I used to do. So trying to figure out what are the things that people care about in the product. Usually that's a product marketing role that kind of ties it all together. But in a lot of small SaaS startups, you're leading with the software, and that positioning comes even after demand gen does, because you built the thing, now you want to sell it. You usually hire your product, and then you hire your sales, or your CEO does sales, and then you hire marketing to scale that. And then you realize that you need to like better define your positioning, and you start to build out that marketing function to be a little bit more specific. Um, but in this case, let's assume they're just going to stay a really small, nimble marketing team of one or two. They need to develop content that drives new interest to their product. So if we can understand what it is about the customers we already have, what they like, then we could build a content strategy that hits both expansion and new demand gen. We could pull new people in and get new people interested based on the most popular features of the product that we know they're going to love because we see other people love it. And so kind of tying that feedback loop together, that's a very specific use case, but it's probably a good starting point for them. And then we can start to expand and say, like, okay, well, we've seen this seasonality. Is it within a certain sub industry, or is it a certain role that we could apply to that? And then maybe we bring in a thought leader to our next webinar that speaks to that role. And so when they have the information available to that and those sub industries and that kind of information, the titles, that's going to come from your CRM. So when you have your product usage data, especially if you can map users to your CRM, that is gold. Like, you can do so much with that. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see how this conversation unfolds. They've had some shakeups on their team, so they are sort of, like I said, throwing all the cards in the air at the moment, and we'll see what they want to focus on, for Q1, and we'll try to align some things to that without crossing that line of over engineering for something that may not last. Like, we want to engineer just enough to give them tools to test with, and then move on from there, so their marketing team can do some cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, lots of questions there. I think the key is like, so what I've seen happen is generally there's only 3 data points, because that is absolutely necessary for one or two things the business needs. They're very small scale, and either it's HubSpot needs it or the other system needs it. And since HubSpot is not driving, it like we don't care if those points are actionable or whatever, right?
Right.
Or what can get people in trouble is like, well, this is still the system of record over here. We still want it in HubSpot. So we're just going to digital twin it, and we wreck HubSpot's data model in the process. So we get all the data, but now we can't action on it as easily as once as, because the system is no longer built around the contact record. It's built around something
Right.
else, right?
Right.
So I think the mapping activities of here's the data that we really need because we can action on it and do these things. This is where it's going to go. I think just defining the space can be
Mm-hmm.
enough to say, like, hey, product team, like, this is why we need this data.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they're thinking on their side is if you just ask for all the data, then it's like, okay, they have no plan. They
Yeah.
just want
And that's
more.
not
And
useful for anyone. It's too
right.
much.
And we either don't trust them. Uh, Actually, we just don't trust them with all the data. Like, or it's going to be a burden for us if we start giving you all the
Right.
data. Now you have questions that we don't want you asking.
Right.
Uh, and so that's where if you can create just a team effort to say, let's figure this out because it's in the best interest, of the business. And
Right.
like, especially if it's CRO leading it, it almost always relates to, renewal, upsell, cross sell,
Right.
and finding churn before it happens.
Yeah.
Right. And that stuff only exists in the product, usage data set.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, is this, how close is this to the uh, other use case that was on your
They're
mind?
such worlds apart. The other use case is so robust. They're a much bigger company. They've been around a lot longer. They're very well established. Their values and goals. I'm actually very impressed with the way that they, structure their planning and how they move through projects. Um, it's funny because I haven't been in the enterprise space very much, and this is one of the few projects that I've had really in my career. I've only worked at big companies once or twice, and for in very specific roles because that's what you do at big companies. So getting into this project where it's like, okay, we're connecting all these dots on this, very specifically defined project, which is always nice. Um, and you have planned for this, you have already put budget into this, you've committed to this, you have these timelines, you have these other resources that are coming into play, like I mentioned, the role that they're hiring to kind of take the baton and keep running and use what we're building for them. um, it's been really cool to see all that come together. But they did all the legwork over the last several decades to get them to this point where they can even ask for this. And they also have a goal of upsell, cross sell, deepen engagement with their users. Very, very different type of model, because they're not like their website is their product. Um, and so measuring, we're looking more at patterns and understanding, what people are doing where, if they do 3 actions with this tag, can we reach out to them to sell this other thing or get the conversation started for this other thing. And so they're really on the complete opposite end of this spectrum from like, initial exploration of like what should we even be looking at. Now I've got this client on the other end that's like, here's the thing we want to do, let's execute against it. Being a bigger company, they've got the resources to kind of let this play out a little bit more than, they've got more of a timeline to test against. Um, but even with that, like, they just needed to get the data. They needed to get to the point where they had enough information in front of them that they could identify those patterns. And we are now at the point where this afternoon I'm going to be spending time launching those custom events into their production environment. Um, and then they'll just have the data. So then I need to coach their new hire on like, here's how you look for it. Here are the things that you need to go research, like develop a hypothesis and then test against the data and see what you find. I think the piece that HubSpot's missing, and we're about to bleed into like a whole other episode on this topic, but the piece that HubSpot is missing is kind of that exploration piece. Like, tell me what the pattern is rather than me saying, I think this is the pattern. Now tell me if that's true. And I have had some conversations that indicate that might be coming. But for now, you kind of have to guess, like just eyeball the data or build a report that will give you some nugget of insight and then chase it and see what happens. Where I would love to get to a point where HubSpot, and I know other products will do this for you, uh, can sort of see those pieces and those common paths and how you might be able to like pattern match against this subset of 5 users to find 20 more that look like them, and how that look like that path. So maybe someday we'll see that. But at least getting all your data in one place and tracking it and having it collected in a structured way gets you like 90% of the way there.
Well, that's where it has to start, no matter what comes.
Right.
Uh, and I think I think James Byrne uh, made a post last week about AI suggesting property values, like as
That
you're
was one of
working.
my favorite features coming out of Inbound in Catherine Mann's presentation. That's like the thing from Inbound that has stuck with me the most. I'm so
Right.
excited to see that
And
feature.
if that's there, I would anticipate that it's looking at similar data sets in similar ways to say,
Right.
like, okay, now that we've got all the data filled in and you've confirmed it in some way, or not confirmed it, because I think
Hmm.
that's like if we have 10 of A and the 11th one comes in and it looks just like A,
Right.
you need to confirm that it is just like A. And then when you do that, you'll start to build insights like, okay, well, these other 10 bought these extra things too. So you should definitely
Right.
sell that to 11, like right now,
Yeah.
or create a deal, right? Uh, so I think that's going to be, I don't think we're that far away from it. But again, if the product data is sitting in another system, it's not going to matter.
Right.
Even if the other
We can get there.
system can give those insights too, you still got to get those insights like into HubSpot, right?
Yeah.
But all of those insights, like it's in somebody's head somewhere that, oh yeah, if they do this, then this definitely should happen next. Or the 5 customers we've had like all mentioned this great thing. And
Yeah.
like, so that's what I've started learning. Like the data exists somewhere. Sometimes it's in people's heads, right? And creating
Well,
that
and
to get it
those
out.
hypotheses exist in people's heads. And
Right.
that's where I think we're kind of missing that piece that helps people discover that without having to rely on a person who might have enough knowledge from all these systems and teams and history to make that hypothesis in the first place. Like, let's shortcut that. Because I think there's, if you envision sort of both sides of the team structure that could exist, one extreme is everybody's siloed. You have to have a meeting to get any information out of anyone, and that might be a very expensive meeting because you have to get to a leadership level before you can get those insights shared to a point where someone's going to do something with it. So let's say you get your head of engineering, your head of product marketing or product management, depending how it's structured, your head of marketing, and then you've got your head of sales. They're all sitting in a room and you are just blowing money on that meeting. So you better get something interesting that's going to grow your pipeline out of it.
Oh, and you never
It's a
do.
very expensive
And
room
you
full of
never do.
people. So when you then take that away and you go to the other extreme where all of that information is available, and maybe it's a quick Slack message that the engineering team is going to be annoyed by, but at least we can get an answer that says, I'm seeing this number, is this accurate, or where is this coming from? Might derail someone for 10 minutes, but you're going to be able to, that 10 minutes is much less expensive than the hour-long meeting you have with the head of departments. And then you've got a junior level marketer who's able to make a decision and set your next webinar topic that's going to matter because they have insight into this information. So when you have everything so siloed that you need to go through campaign planning, and it's a quarterly effort to do an expansion campaign, and you've got to execute and create playbooks for sales and customer service, and you've got to get this data pull, and you have to get this list, and then you have to check it against opt-ins, and you've got all of that existing in different teams. That effort is going to take you 3 to 6 months to execute. When you just move to the other side of that spectrum and everyone can click around, maybe you run a lunch and learn, and you get everyone up to speed on whatever product it is, if it's not HubSpot, that you can view product information in. One, you should figure out how to get that in HubSpot. And two, it means that everybody has this democratized access to data that they can do more with to push the company further.
Oh man, once you can get people with to define and like be on board with that last goal, like
Yeah.
putting data in front of everybody, because so easily it because I've seen this too. Like when you get rid of the meeting
Hmm.
because everybody hates it, it's not productive. We need time back on our schedule, but then
Hmm.
you don't solve for the communication that still needs to happen. You have all these impromptu meetings that pop up because I still need the information,
Right.
right? So it's not about like it's so easy to point to like we need to save time, so let's look at our meetings and reduce meetings. It's like, oh, what do we need to communicate effectively about, right? And that's where in
Yeah.
this case we're talking about a dashboard that everybody sees at all times. And now the meeting like is 100 times more valuable, and you better damn
Right.
well we're all excited to go there because it
Yeah.
like just the conversations change, right? Because we're not
Yeah.
debating what the data is. We're talking about what it means for the business.
Right. And how it grows the business,
Yeah.
which is
Uh
what everybody wants. I yesterday the Marketunist, they're one of my favorite weekly inbox gems. Um, I'll post it to my LinkedIn because it was worth it. But it was talking about the growth fairy. It was this chart that was just going down, you know, way down, and then a projection that goes straight up and to the right. And it
yeah.
was saying, let's all believe in the growth fairy.
We're
And
gonna sell
I
100
think
units
that's
this
where
year.
breaking down these walls, the growth fairy can be real.
Right. It can be. It starts with visibility and all the stuff we talk about every week. So this is fun. I think
This is a good one.
it's a necessary conversation. Um, so much of this is just learning how to talk to each other inside the business, like not so much asking each other for all these things that we need and you don't know why we need them, but like figuring out together, like, hey, I hear you. You're seeing these product trends. If I had it over here, like we could do something about it. Like we could make money.
Right.
We could understand feedback faster, right? Um, so this is maybe we should take a look at that that AI suggested, property fill mechanism next week, because that I am
Yeah.
excited for things like that. That's gonna getting to work like it's all been for that, right? In a lot of
Right.
ways, like when you create this place to work in and get the data right, getting the associations right, all that stuff just supercharges, what you're able to do with HubSpot and makes the investment worthwhile, honestly. Um,
Yeah.
so I think we'll take a look at that next week, if we both remember at least.
We'll
Otherwise,
schedule
we're
a
definitely
Slack
going to
to
be
remind
talking
us both.
about, uh, making your workspaces better, making your time with HubSpot more valuable. So until then, think about which product data and maybe like drop us a line. Uh, Even how have you been asking for it? Maybe we can help you ask for it in a different way. Get some better alignment with your team, find those opportunities, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.